Hi everybody, I'm back. Yes, it's raining in New York, which is good, we need it. But good opportunity for me to do some demonstrations for you. Today I think the topic I want to talk about more than anything, at least initially, is drawing. I've been getting a lot of requests and questions about drawing and perspective, etc. So I think I'd go a little deeper today into that. I will probably do this demonstration in two separate videos. The design, composition, drawing, and then I think I'll stop and then do a separate video on the watercolor of that drawing when it's finished. So, might be a bit of a long one, but hopefully packed with info that you'll find helpful, useful, infuriating, annoying, or at least entertaining. Okay, subject matter. This is one of my favorite places on earth. This is an iconic building, Fallingwater, in rural Pennsylvania, designed in 1935, I believe, by the iconic American architect Frank Lloyd Wright. It's among his most famous and most photographed recognizable subjects. The Guggenheim Museum here in New York City, maybe another, and there are a few others, but this might be the most popular. Maybe for that reason I've avoided drawing and painting it all these years. I've gone to visit it, many times, probably 6 or 8 times in different seasons. It is very beautiful to look at, but it's a beautiful idea. Wright was a very self-motivated architect who had very strong ideas. He did listen to his clients, but he often had to teach them some things they didn't want to know, and you could argue whether he was right or wrong to do that, but for this discussion, doesn't matter, that's what he did. He was a genius, very innovative, groundbreaking construction, groundbreaking design ideas, especially for the early 1930s. As a painting subject, though, it attracts me because I have a number of photos here. A couple of these are mine, and I've also printed some from the internet. It was designed and built for the Hoffman family, owner of a large string of department stores, I believe. Interestingly, there's another Hoffman weekend house in Palm Springs designed by my favorite architect, sorry Frank, Richard Neutra. Beautiful Hoffman house in Palm Springs, California. Anyway, during the arguments and discussions with his client, as I read, Wright's idea was they wanted a house overlooking this beautiful stream in rural Pennsylvania. This is about an hour outside of Pittsburgh. Wright felt very strongly that a house shouldn't necessarily be situated so that it looked at the view, but that the house should be more experiential, more involved with the site, more involved with the view, so that in order to experience the view, you had to live in the house, walk out, look at the view, a little bit more of a proactive experience. I'm picking my words here because I don't think we need to go into this long discussion. But his whole inception for designing this house was that the house be built on the view rather than in front of or behind or beside it, so that it interacted with the view. This concept excites me as a painter and an architect as well, but as a painter because I'm very taken with the idea of contrast. I talk a lot about that. Light versus dark, yes, of course, but more philosophically or conceptually. Here, of course, we have this beautiful contrast of the man-made world or the built environment interacting with the natural world. That contrast is just really the root of this entire construction project. And it really is the root of the way I like to paint. The things I like to paint are inspired by the idea of contrast, two opposing energies, if you like to think of it that way, I do, meeting on the surface of the paper, trying to find resolution. So warm and cool colors, vertical versus horizontal energies, the built environment versus the natural world, light versus dark, of course. I also often love to play with the idea of what's real and what's imagined, what is a dream state, what is remembered, what is present, what is past, and what may be future, the whole elements of time in some of my more conceptual paintings. This one isn't that conceptual, it's a real place, and I want to try to do an interpretation of it, not an interpretation where I change the design, but where I make these images more personal to me, the kind of things I like to think about as a painter, and I think they'll dovetail nicely with the actuality of the site and the design itself. Okay, so what I'm doing is, from all these photo references I have, I'm going to redesign it a bit and try to make a composition. I've started here in my sketchbook, just little doodles to see how I want to think of this. The house is dominantly horizontal, of course. It belongs to the landscape. There's this beautiful stream here with these protruding shelves of stones, shale, a lot of different stones, but a lot of shale and horizontal bandings with small waterfalls stepping down. So of course you can see the rhythm of that is picked up in the design, and that's just beautiful and inspired. I want to do something like that, or at least a nod to that in my painting. So I think, however, rather than emphasize the whole painting as being sort of relentlessly horizontal, I thought I might try a more vertical composition that would set up yet another contrast, which would be the horizontal energies versus the vertical. If you make a vertical composition, you're automatically teaching the viewer that you want dominantly their attention to be pulled through the painting in the vertical axis. There's the X, the Y axis. So along the Y axis, sort of setting up these organic connections between heaven and earth, if you like, or earth and sky. But anyway, connections along the vertical. I thought in this way I'd give a little bit more dominance to this rhythm of vertical. Water falling here, here, and then the vertical stacking of the architecture and the trees, of course, melting up into the sky. You could do a very nice horizontal painting of this, I'm sure, but I thought I'd like to try this instead. I just did this very quick sketch, and I think it's okay. It's starting to get me there, but you can see here the horizon line sort of bisects the image, and that's not good compositionally always, rarely. But also, I think if I really want to emphasize the sense of water, I probably want a little bit more real estate at the bottom of the page and a little less at the top. So I think I'm going to crop a bit of the sky off, add a bit of the forest, the stream, water down below. Then what that'll help do is push the horizon line off the center, give a dominance to the bottom of the painting and a secondary place to the top of the painting. Doesn't mean any of these things are unimportant, but when you're thinking about composition, it's always good to have a dominant and then a secondary element. There's always a hero. An equal mix of light and dark can be troublesome. An equal mix of warm and cool can be troublesome. It's always good to, I think, have one dominant and the other a sort of supporting cast member in the briefest terms. So we have the x-axis, the horizon here, and the y-axis will read through the composition this way. This doesn't locate things so much, but it just locates an area of dominant vertical energy, secondary horizontal energy. This does coincide with this dominant architectural element, this big stone pylon pillar off of which the entire design radiates. It's a very, very clever design. So in just brief terms, I think that's good enough. When I move on to the actual paper, I'll make those corrections. So this would be your horizon, your x-axis, and this will be the y-axis, the dominant vertical. Paper, just using Arches 140 pound. This is about a 16 by 12 inch drawing, not tiny, but not very big at all. Rough surface. Sketch pencils, these are these fantastic black wings, Palominos. This is the pearl, the white, which is a little bit less soft, and then these Blackwing 602s, which I really love. These are just a bit softer, really phenomenal sketch pencils. I rely on them heavily. I also like this Faber-Castell. The downside of these Blackwings is you have to sharpen them repeatedly. So if you're traveling and don't have a sharpener nearby, this is a great pencil too. These are a mechanical pencil, but with slightly thicker leads that you can buy in all sorts of hardnesses or softnesses. This is about an HB lead, roughly a 2B. That you just drop in, and it's just a very convenient, nice to hold pencil. These are made by Faber-Castell. They're called Emotion, cute name. But anyway, they're great. Again, you can, just great for traveling, but I use this at home and wherever I am. So yes, that's the dominant axes of my painting. I can now just start sketching in some of the elements. I'm going to do a 2-point perspective of this and try to talk while I'm drawing, do my best to sort of tell you my thinking as I'm walking through this. Perspective is second nature to some of you, I'm sure, and perhaps a bit of a mystery to others of you. But I think the first thing you need to know about drawing in perspective is locating the horizon line is always the first line I draw. And the horizon line is not where everything stops. It's a line that bisects your viewpoint. It bisects your sight, your vision. This photo was taken standing on a rock down in the stream bed, and the horizon line is where everything seems to flatten out. So things above the horizon line become gradually more and more acute in angles as they radiate up, and things below the horizon line do the opposite. So everything reaches up and vanishes at the horizon line. If you imagine yourself standing on a beach, I use this in my classes a lot. This is, I think, one of the easiest ways to visualize the horizon line. But imagine yourself standing on a beach. So there's ocean below, sky above. The horizon line is where, of course, the sky will meet the water. That's pretty easy for all of us to understand. But then imagine a series of sailboats sailing away from you into the distance. When they get far enough away that you can't see them anymore, they vanish. That would be on the horizon line. The horizon line is literally infinity, or the limits to which we can see. If all these boats are assumed to be the same size, obviously things that are farther away from you look smaller than things that are closer to you if they're of equal size. So this boat and this boat are the same size, but the one farther away, of course, looks smaller. That's all perspective is. We're drawing on a two-dimensional surface of paper, so this whole idea of perspective is literally a magic act. It's an illusion, and I love it. It's fun to play with. But if you think of it as play and manipulating illusions of drawing, it just takes some of the scary eat your spinach vibe that drawing in perspective can sometimes have. It's just an illusion. Things that are closer look bigger, things that are farther away look smaller, and then in more sophisticated ways, things that are closer often have harder edges, darker values, more saturated color. Things farther away often have softer edges, less saturation, less value, etc. The other thing to remember about drawing in perspective is that things above the horizon tend to slope down to meet the horizon visually, and things below the horizon tend to look as if they slope up to meet the horizon. It's common sense when you think about it, but it's just that little bit of knowledge is very helpful when you're sketching. So I begin sketching out this house. The parts of the house that are above the horizon line, above my eyesight, appear to slope down to meet the horizon. We're seeing both sides of this object, this house, and so we're going to see there will be two vanishing points. This one I think will be pretty much off the page, which means it'll be out there somewhere. No need to locate it always, just knowing it's there and knowing it's along this line is usually enough for you to sketch pretty close to where it would actually be. For the record, when sketching for a watercolor or just sketching in general, I don't know that I feel that your perspective always has to be pristine or perfect. I think you can almost fall into a trap when your drawings are too perfect. They start to look a bit dry and antiseptic and technical. For some paintings or some works, you may want that, so that's fine. But if you're going for a more loose, fluid approach to your work, yeah, they may look a little too rigid. So what I'm saying is, give yourself a break. Don't feel like you have to make your drawings perfect or that the perspective has to be absolutely bang on at all times. It really doesn't. If it's close enough, often that's best, in my opinion. Again, that varies depending on what kind of a drawing you may be doing or what kind of artist you are or what kind of look you're after. Sometimes you want more specificity, more clarity, and other times maybe not as much. So there's never any necessarily one right answer. So these are these poured in place concrete terraces and roofs with massive, impressive cantilevers on all of them. I think the story is true, but what I heard was the construction of this building was so controversial that after the workmen poured the concrete in place, they were afraid to move the supporting forms for fear it would all collapse on top of them. I don't know. The legend is that Frank Lloyd Wright ran out and kicked out some of the supporting wood members and proved to all of them that he was a genius and knew what he was talking about. if that's wrong, somebody in the comments can correct me or clarify that story. It's just based on a foggy memory I have. It sounds a little bit Ayn Randian and legendary, and maybe has a scrap of truth to it, but maybe not entirely the truth. I'm not sure. But I do know this construction technique was very controversial and people were afraid of it, but ultimately it worked, although it has caused the owners and caretakers a lot of trouble over the years with cracking and maintenance. But one must suffer for their art, right? So you can see I'm just sketching freehand here, but these lines gradually start sloping down closer and closer to the horizon as I'm going. And when they reach the horizon, everything will literally flatten out, because just like at our little beach scene, everything when it reaches the horizon appears to vanish from our view. So everything will condense, 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 until it reaches the horizon. Then everything appears to be perfectly flat. I've been requested, I think it's something I'd like to do, that is to say a full perspective, a lesson on perspective here on YouTube. And I know I reference it a lot, but I haven't actually done a full lesson on it, and I think maybe I should do that. It might be helpful. I think, like everything in life, if we think about drawing in perspective and take the fear out of it and realize that you don't work for it, it works for you. It's just a tool for you as an artist to tell better stories, to make more expressive paintings. It doesn't have to be medicinal. It's a tool, you can use it. And once you have a basic understanding of perspective, you begin to quickly realize that you can manipulate it, change it, torque it, break the rules a little bit here and there to tell really much more expressive stories. So when I referenced a few minutes ago that you don't have to make your drawings absolutely perspectively accurate, no, you don't. But similarly, you can also, when you begin to understand it a bit, also understand that you can play with it, twist it, torque it, do different things, tell different stories. Why not? It's there for you. It's a tool that works for you. So here I'm just laying in some of the outcroppings of rocks and little hints of the beginnings of the waterfall coming down. It is such a beautiful place. I was there in winter, I think only once. It's also very beautiful if you're lucky enough to see it in the snow. It's one of these places that if you can see it before you die, you really ought to try. It's, I mean, even for people that aren't particularly in love with architecture, it's just such a moving place. It's beautiful inside too, of course. Wright was very instrumental in the beginning ideas of architecture, emphasizing the indoors and the outdoors and merging the two philosophically and literally. The inside of this house has such a connection to the earth. There's a large boulder that sticks up in the middle of the living room. Again, mythically, I heard that wasn't really intended to be there, but they had a difficult time removing it. enough, so ultimately they decided to just work it into the design of the house, and it now forms part of the fireplace hearth. I admire painters who can paint and draw rocks. I find them deceptively not complex, but they're easy enough to draw and to paint, but they're also very easy to make them look very bad. So I'm always looking for simpler ways of doing them. Now there are these horizontal surfaces of water. When the short waterfall stops, you'll see a bit of flat water here. Same up top, although this is so near the horizon, you're only going to see just a little sliver, a little sliver of pure white. I don't need to be photorealistic about this waterfall. I mean, I have the power. Sounds pretentious, but I can move these around. I can change where the water comes down. I can add rocks or remove them. I want to be fairly faithful to the site, but if it does make my drawing or painting better in any way, sure, why not? And again, I've been there in different seasons, and depending on the rainfall and etc., these waterfalls do literally change. The volume of water coming over changes. Sometimes there's water running off this edge as well. So it doesn't always look the same in every photograph. So knowing that, it sort of gives you, as the artiste, a little freedom to be a little more creative than you might. Right, well, at this stage, many of the basic shapes that I want to be in the final painting are here. I'm building up what I consider a pretty nice random rhythm of vertical elements, the water, the stone pier, here. So you'll hopefully get this nice patterning of vertical elements running through, and then counterbalanced with these insistent horizontal bands of both built environment, architecture, and nature. Wanting them all to meld together. Oddly enough, perhaps what I'm stressed about, which I could deny and say I'm not, but I always try to be honest, is how to treat in this painting these trees. They're important. They want to frame this view side to side, but really they're more supporting visual elements. I don't want them to be too dominant. That's what I'm hinting at. So as I'm drawing and as I'm talking, I'm trying to think of ways that I might ultimately paint them. I think probably in terms of value, overall a little lighter, a little looser, a little more suggestive, and not quite so illustrative. For my poor students, I'm always yammering. Oh yeah, here you can see the water looks quite different as it comes down over this ledge than it does in the other photo. But in any case, these photos show you the downside of using photo reference too literally when you paint or draw. A photo, pretty as it might be, has a way of flattening everything out and making all the values the same. The trees in the distance are pretty much the same color, tone, saturation, and value as the trees in the foreground. Visually, that might not be bad, but it's my belief that as a painter, that's not good enough. I want this illusion of three-dimensionality. We talked about the X and the Y axis, but the Z axis, the illusory axis that pulls the viewer into the painting and makes your drawing or painting look as if it's in 3 dimensions requires, first, in this case, the drawing perspective, but also the perspective you can gain by the layering of values, darks, midtones, lights, to begin to suggest distance and depth. So, yeah, I think it's incumbent on the artist to redesign what they look at a fair amount, to manipulate what they see in a photo to make for a better painting, or at least a more personal one. Anybody can just blow up a photograph, trace it, copy it, but really, I think we can do better than that. Such a crazy house. I don't know what the construction of this place must have cost. Even in 1930s dollars, it must have been inordinately expensive. I don't think Frank Lloyd Wright got out of bed for a small fee. I don't know that in this case, but I doubt it. But these wild metal windows, stonework, the construction of this place is just so innovative and different and amazing. A lot of the left side of the house is going to vanish behind the trees, but I'll just ghost a little bit in here. I think that's good enough. We'll get the idea. Oh, drawing is almost always going to require the use of an eraser. I never make a mistake, but I understand some of you do. Just joking. It could be said I make nothing but mistakes. Anyway, erasing on watercolor paper is a dodgy prospect often because erasers can literally scratch or damage the surface of the paper. So I use these very soft white vinyl erasers most often. This one's by Mono. Yeah, and they reduce the risk of scratching or carving into your paper a great deal. I think on, because this is the dominant vertical third of the painting, I'll probably make these trees a little bit more aggressive and fade these back a little bit. Overall, though, I want the energy of the painting to read in this pattern here of lights and darks. So I don't want too much extreme value left and right, I don't think. We'll see as the painting develops. I may change my mind a bit. I'll probably bring bits of this tree down a bit to lap over this house to also establish the sense of three-dimensionality. I love to draw, but drawing trees that you're intending on painting is really dodgy. I urge myself and my groups to draw much less than you think you might want to. I think it's okay to place the major trunks and shapes of the tree, but really your paintings are going to look so much better if you just allow your paintbrush to draw them for you, if you will. So yeah, I'm just placing sort of the envelope where I want the trees to appear, and I'm just going to be hopefully pretty fluid and quick about locating these trees and what I want them to look like. What I'm driving at is the energy of this painting is really in this serpentine path right up the middle, all of my darks and lights. Too much energy on the sides of the work, I know will pull attention and energy away from the subject matter, so I don't want that to happen. I think a little bit about how I might want to terminate the drawing at the bottom edge. I don't, again, want too much energy pulling the viewer off the page, but I think I'll just lightly and suggestively imply some lower trees, shrubs, that sort of thing. Sort of fluidly intermixed with some additional rocks, stones, elements of the landscape, and hopefully just allow the painting to melt away at the bottom in an intentionally mysterious way. Similarly, the top of the painting, I'm thinking about these trees just melting up into the sky and not becoming a big deal. A big deal graphically, that is. Yeah, I think that's good enough. I get the idea. So if we go back to my reference sketch, this is what I'll mostly paint from, rather than the reference photos. The dominant story of this painting is this path of values that leads the viewer into the painting at the top and then out again at the bottom. Or it could read the other way, but sets up these connections between sky, landscape, built environment, back into landscape, the distance, the midground, the foreground, all of them orchestrated along this serpentine pattern which sort of weaves along the dominant y-axis. And the way to do that is to establish a path of light. So the lightest lights will be here, here, here on these faces of the building. Here, the water, of course, the water. Little strips of horizontal water. Those will be the lightest lights in the painting. Midtones will be largely on the sides, bits in the sky, bits down here. I'll probably put a little bit of, if not pure white, nearly white, so 1.5 value perhaps at the top, to set up this connection of lights from, again, the foreground to the distance, from the earth to the sky. Then, to make those lights pop out, of course, you need dark. In watercolor, the lightest lights, really everything is generated from the surface of the paper, so it's the white of the paper shining through that makes the whites work. So in order for those to read, all we do is paint the shades and the shadows, the darks. So the darkest darks will be here, my number 3 value, a bit here, 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 and here. So you can see they're just sandwiching in this organic way. They're visually connected, if not physically touching, but it makes this visually connected pattern of lights, darks, lights, darks, lights, darks, all the way through the painting. Fading off a bit in intensity, both the bottom and the top, and definitely fading off at either side. As a plan, I think it works. There may be some changes as I start painting, we'll see, but generally speaking, I think it should work fairly well. As a perspective, again, it's a pretty traditional 2-point, and a 2-point perspective means you can see an object, you can see 2 sides of the same object. A 1-point perspective usually means you're just walking up on an object and seeing one face of it. If it's a house or a person or an animal or a tree or a car or whatever it is, you can only see one face. I love one-point perspectives, but I think here a two-point adds a bit more energy and dynamism. So here we see a bit of the left side, a bit of the right side, divided by this large vertical stone pier. Okay, that's all I'm going to do for drawing. I think, again, I'm going to let my paintbrush sort of fill in the rest of the details. And I'll prepare my palette, and then I'll be back in a couple of minutes to do a demonstration of the painting of this. But thanks for watching, and I will see you soon.